Hello and a very warm welcome to NDTV Profit. It's a Dussehra Dhamaka. Here we are at the Notanpalli Sarbojanin Durga Pandal. That is where we are at. It's in Bandra West in Mumbai. This time of the year, the festivities are all about the Garba season and the pandals that dot the city's landscape in Mumbai, of course, and across the country as well. And we are here at one of them enjoying the festivities. This one has been around for the last 53 years. But here we are looking at the festive season. We are trying to figure out if the demand that we are seeing all around us, whether it's about the auto sector, whether it's about the groceries that we buy, is it actually translating? Is this consumption story going to be the growth story that India can bank upon and the markets can count on for the next round of rise that we are talking about? And indeed, to be able to do that, I have great guests, market experts who've been trawling the markets very, very closely. Mayuresh Joshi is with us and Amrish Baliga as well. Great to have you with us. And greetings of the season.
Thank you.
Have you been celebrating in a big way? You need to...
Thank you. And wishing all of you a very happy Dussehra.
Thank you.
Yes, we've been celebrating. This is the festive season and we have been celebrating. But unfortunately, the markets were not last few days.
What's the reason, Amrish?
I don't know what the reason was. Because if you see the last couple of months, there has been so much of adverse news. Right from tariffs to the issue with Indo-Pak. And then you had the Iran port issue.
Yes.
And you had the Saudi-Pak understanding. All this has been negative, and the H1B visa. But despite that, if the markets have not cracked, they have only corrected.
Correct.
I think
that says something about resilience.
That says a lot about resilience.
Correct.
That says a lot about the sort of fund flow which is happening from the retail.
Right.
I'm not saying the markets are cheap, but I think the fund flow is something which will keep the markets going.
But Mayuresh, why do we keep talking about valuations being so high? And this is not just an Indian story, right, about valuations. It's across the world.
Absolutely. No, first of all, I think beautiful venue.
It's lovely pandal.
Absolutely. So I'm praying that Ma Durga showers health, wealth, and prosperity for you and all your viewers at NDTV Profit as well. So earnings remains the 4 point, right? I think everybody of us agrees that earnings is something that the markets remain slave to, and therefore I think earnings had definitely slowed down. It was very, very evident over the last few quarters. With GST rationalization expected to start coming in, specifically from Q3, your question, whether consumption comes back very, very strongly,
correct,
you're actually seeing a lot of festive fervor out here, right? And it's just started. So Diwali is around the corner and all the festivities will start coming in. And whatever I've been seeing on ground, whenever I visit consumer durable shops as an example, or even discretionary shops as an example, I think a lot of customers were waiting for that September 22 deadline when the rates will actually come down.
Correct.
And you've actually seen that. You mentioned autos. And there has been a significant kind of footfalls that we've been hearing from dealers and distributors. So whether that translates into second half earnings actually coming back very, very strongly.
Yes.
And as Amrish said, I think flows remain strong and resilient. And if earnings come back, do the GORAs or the FIs, FPIs come back very, very strongly as well following strong earnings is a question to be answered. But yes, I think the consumption story, which is the backbone of the Indian economy, if that starts throwing up surprises, which I hope it should, I think markets...
The upsides in the markets.
Absolutely. Because
really?
As Amrish said, I think the valuations are fair.
Right.
But if earnings start coming back, you again got a premium tag given to the Indian markets.
So we're looking at another big bull run is what you seem to be suggesting, Mayuresh. Of course, whether or not that happens, it's something that we are tracking. But, right now, as far as GST is concerned, the entire rollout, and perhaps that was the reason, despite the global headwinds, you have some positive news coming in on the tax slabs, on the GST front, the revised rates. They have provided an impetus to the markets. There's no taking away from that fact that it has. But if you look at the ground realities, some of that pass-through not exactly happening right from the word go, not from the 22nd of September. And that's what we've realized. But is it actually happening when it comes to gold and silver? Because that's another story. Look at the way the gold prices have been zooming up, right? Now, if you look at these gold prices and still see demand, because people are anticipating prices to go up even further, and that's why they are buying. Whether or not that is the case is something that we are tracking. In fact, my colleague Charu Singh has been out there in Jhaveri Bazaar today trying to give us a sense of where the demand situation now lies when it comes to jewelry, which has turned to be so expensive. This is the report she's filed.
On the auspicious occasion of Dussehra, NDTV Profit is here in Zaveri Bazaar at Umaid Mal Tilokchand Zaveri shop. And this is a shop that is 100 years old. In fact, if you look towards my left, you can see how the prices of gold have changed over the past 100 years, starting from 18.75 rupees in 1925 to about 1,03,000 in 2025. And it continues to increase as time passes. And we have with us someone from the shop itself to speak to us about how these sales have been impacted and what is to be expected in the festive season. So namaskar, thank you so much for speaking to Profit. So सबसे पहले मैं आपसे ये जानना चाहती हूँ कि जब कोई फेस्टिवल नहीं चल रहा होता है, फेस्टिव सीजन नहीं, जैसे गणेश चतुर्थी से पहले का टाइम, और अब अगर आप कंपेयर करें तो कितना प्रतिशत सेल्स बढ़ जाती है?
डिपेंड्स ऑन द कस्टमर्स. यूजुअली अभी शादियों का सीजन है, इसमें फुल काम है, हमारे पास ज़बरदस्त काम है. ये रेट में भी बुलियन की बाइंग है, ज्वेलरी बाइंग है, सब बाइंग है. एक बहुत अच्छा काम है.
सर फुटफॉल कितना बढ़ जाता है, कितने कस्टमर ज़्यादा आने लग जाते हैं?
यूजुअली हमेशा नॉर्मल इतने रेट बढ़ने के बावजूद भी 60 से 70% ज़्यादा ग्राहकी है.
गोल्ड हमारे में शुभ माना जाता है दशहरे के दिन खरीदने के लिए. उसके लिए हम गोल्ड खरीदते हैं, भले 1 ग्राम खरीदे 2 ग्राम खरीदे, लेकिन गोल्ड खरीदना शुभ माना जाता है.
हम लोग ने जब देखा था, एक्चुअली लेने का विचार किया था, तभी 90-95,000 चल रहा था. अभी सडनली महीना भर में बहुत इंक्रीज़ हो गया रेट, तो उसके हिसाब से थोड़ा इफेक्ट तो हुआ ही है, हमारे पॉकेट पे इफेक्ट तो हुआ है, बट फिर भी ठीक है.
सर पहले मैं आपसे ये जानना चाहती हूँ कि किस तरह के ऑर्नामेंट्स या मूर्तियाँ सबसे ज़्यादा दिखती हैं इस सीज़न में?
इस सीज़न में दुर्गा माँ, नवरात्रि के पहले दुर्गा माँ चलते हैं और राम दरबार चलते हैं, और जैसे ही नवरात्रि पूरी होने आए तब लक्ष्मी, गणेश, कुबेर ये मूर्तियाँ ज़्यादा चलने लगती है, क्योंकि अब ये लक्ष्मी पूजन के हिसाब से ये चलती है. और धन्वंतरी ये मूर्तियाँ चलती है, छोटी से बड़ी सभी साइज़ की मूर्तियाँ चलती है.
सर अभी ब्रास का और कॉपर का रेट क्या चल रहा है, और ये पिछले 1 महीने में बढ़ा है क्या?
पिछले साल ब्रास का रेट था 400 के आसपास, 380 से 400, और इस बार ये जो 550 से 600 रुपया ब्रास का रेट हो गया, यानी 1.5 हो गया है रेट. और कॉपर में भी यही हाल है, पिछले साल 600 के आसपास चल रहा था, इस साल 900 रुपया हो गया है कॉपर. और कांसे की बात करें तो कांसे में भी 1.5 रेट हो गया है.
सर इससे डिमांड पे कोई फ़र्क पड़ा है?
नहीं, डिमांड पे इससे कोई ज़्यादा फ़र्क नहीं पड़ा है, 5-7% का फ़र्क नहीं है, क्योंकि देखा जाए तो जिसको लेना है वो लेके ही रहता है.
सर जीएसटी के भी रेट कट्स अभी सितंबर 22 से आए, उसके बाद क्या चेंज देखा आपने?
थोड़ा बहुत 10% मिला है, क्योंकि 22 तारीख से लेकर अभी तक ज़्यादा डिफरेंस नहीं है, पर मुझे लगता है और 8 दिन में और ज़्यादा 25% का बढ़ोतरी होनी चाहिए कस्टमर्स में.
ये फुटफॉल कब तक इंक्रीज़ होता रहेगा? अभी
ये होना ज़रूरी है, अगर होगा तो बहुत बेटर है, ताकि लोगों को भी और भी फ़ायदा हो जाए. हम भी चाहते हैं कि हमारे पास रिटेल ऑनलाइन से ज़्यादा हमारे पास जाके कस्टमर्स रिटेल में जो देख के उनको पसंद आए और हमारे पास परचेस करें तो हमको भी अच्छा लगता है.
So there is demand. That's what we're finding out from people in Jhaveri Bazaar. That's the ground report. But when we spoke to the Bullion Association chief, he had another story to tell as well, that because of the high prices of gold, so you're finding a dichotomous view. Just listen to what he said as well.
We are here with IBJA National Secretary Mr. Surendra Mehta to understand what kind of a demand are we seeing in the jewelry market as the festive season builds up. How is it? Has it been bad? Has it been good? What do jewelers across Mumbai tell you?
As we all know, the jewelry prices have been surging high, and they are almost 67% up in comparison to the last year prices. So naturally the demand has to fall, and we are seeing a drastic fall in the demand mostly in the metropolitan city, but in the 2-tier and 3-tier cities the demand is reasonably okay, as compared to the last year. But what we are seeing in the market is that lightweight jewelry are being sold more, and low caratage jewelry like 18 carat instead of 22 carat, 14 carat, and even 9 carat jewelry are being available for sale, and people are opting to buy those jewelry. As far as silver is concerned, the demand for silver is quite surprisingly very good, and I think we will be matching it with the last year demand.
Right. So, if I were to summarize that in a few words, would you agree that festive volumes will not be picking up as we go ahead through the season?
Yeah, I personally feel that we would be lower by about 27 to 28% in respect of volume as compared to the last year. But value-wise, of course, it would be much higher as the gold prices have gone up by more than 65%.
So there you have it from the chief of the Bullion Association as well. You're getting a sense of gold and silver and the kind of demand that's panning out over there, despite the kind of rise that we've seen on those prices. But then when you compare what's happened over the last, considerable period of time in the equity markets, and then you see certain asset classes having done remarkably better than what the equities have delivered, at least in recent times, then you stop and question. Then you have the RBI taking a decision on rates today. And Madhvi is here. She's joining us. Madhvi Arora, of course, is lead economist at MK Global. It's great to have you, Madhvi. What did you make of the RBI's decision as far as interest rates are concerned? There is the consumption story and there is economic growth. Now, the balancing act is what the RBI needs to do. Where are we at and this latest decision where projections on growth, on GDP have been made and on inflation? So how much of a demon is inflation right now, according to you, that the RBI is tackling?
See, at this point in time, if I look at the growth matrix, right, RBI seems to be sort of comfortable in the near term. We've actually have seen surprises on growth front because a lot of front loading has happened in terms of exports to the US. Policy front loading also has happened in terms of government spending, both from center and states. And there's been a deflator effect, which I'm not going to get into. It's very technical. But, you probably are going to be seeing a 7% plus growth in second quarter as well. But the underlying dynamics are quite weak. So statistical anomalies have made it look very fancy. But we all know that the consumption dynamics have actually evolved, especially in the urban segment, not in a very favorable fashion. Last 1.5 years, what you've seen is that the income effect has been so dominating, especially in urban economy, that you are seeing a consistent slowdown in urban consumption.
Right.
On the contrary, the rural, semi-urban actually has done pretty well in the last 1.5 years after being MIA for the last 7 years. So There's been a macro rotation within the consumption matrix away from urban to semi-urban and rural side. But unfortunately, on a value added point of view, 70% of the consumption story is driven by urban, 30% by rural in terms of value add. I'm not sort of making any segregation. So consumption on net is still weak because urban segment has come down, especially because of the weakening income effect.
Right.
And that would not change with, the kind of policy cuts that you've seen in the by the RBI. Of course, that will help ensure that it doesn't fall from here on. But, in the end, the dominating factor is going to be the income effect. So, Reserve Bank cuts, policy transmissions, the GST cuts or the income tax cuts that they have, laid out in the budget, all of that would definitely be the incremental levers which could ensure that consumption doesn't fall from here on.
So we
but
talk about
are we looking at a V-shaped story? I'm not very sure on that.
Oh, I see. So consumption generally has a multiplier effect.
Correct.
Mayuresh, weigh in on this. As far as the markets are concerned, how do they see it? How do markets look at the consumption story right now and how much it kind of builds into the sentiment that currently exists in the market? How much have we factored in? How much of growth are you expecting because of it?
So first of all, what Madhavi said, MIA, I was a little bit relieved because she didn't say KIA, right? So taking that into account, I think if you look at the two aspects, urban and rural consumption, urban consumption should see signs of pickup as we head into the third quarter. Are you seeing some exponential growth coming through in terms of consumer durables, as an example? I think the initial feelers that we are getting when we are doing a lot of dealer checks is that there are footfalls and there is expected demand coming back. Rural had also shown signs of recovery.
But this pickup that you're talking about, sorry to interject, but is it in places where they matter most? Auto sector for one. Because you're talking about big ticket kind of numbers.
Oh, absolutely,
Right?
absolutely.
So it's happening over there is
Yes,
what you're picking up.
Yes, yes. And in fact, the more surprising aspect was the ticket size of auto sector is not small, right? And our hope was that with the GST cut, how much of incremental demand will come back? But we're actually seeing demand come back very, very strongly for the autos as a space, as an example, right? The more interesting aspect is the discretionary spending, both in terms of urban and rural, is expected to make a very strong comeback, as Madhvi also mentioned. Rural had already started showing signs of green shoots. How does that come back strongly in terms of volumes? Whether it's FMCG companies, whether it's footwear players, whether it's apparel players, whether it's your QSR players as an example, will play out very, very strongly in Q3, Q4. But the bigger question is, does that sustain after that?
Correct.
And the sustainability then depends on a lot of other factors, including income level sustainability, employment, global risk off. And therefore, I think the next 2 quarters, the earnings might come back strongly with
Right.
GST rationalization. Whether it's sustainable at that level is something we need to ponder.
So what's the expectation on the earnings front, Amrish? It's going to be a key factor to watch out for. It's going to determine whether FIIs are going to return in a big way or not. What's your sense?
See, if you're talking of Q2, don't really have any expectations. I don't think it will be very different than what we have seen in Q1. And in some cases, it could be worse. And mind you, it could be worse for some of the consumer companies. That's
Why do you say that?
That's
and
because
which are the pockets in the consumption sector you're seeing that pain
that's
come through?
because, number one, post August 15th, a lot of people had deferred their purchases.
Right.
Because of expectation of GST,
GST cuts.
And despite some of the companies really offering you discounts earlier, what's happened is on the supply chain part of it, there has been an issue as far as GST is concerned. So a lot of adjustments will happen in the September quarter, which could mean a hit on margin for the manufacturing companies.
Right.
So I think
And for the manufacturers, is it more of difficulty when you talk about the tariff pressures as well? Is that going to build that much more of a chance that there's going to be some kind of dumping? Because where does all this go? And I was talking to Mayuresh just on the offline about this possibility as well. So if America as a market doesn't take as much as it used to, where do all those goods go? And if some of that actually turns into dumping, does that put pressure on the pricing, on manufacturers in the long term?
no, see, I mean, here we need to be very sector specific, we need to be company specific. Those sectors or companies which are very dependent on US, I think they are done,
Right.
at least for the time being. And I think it's going to take a lot of time for them to look for new buyers, new geographies.
Right.
But in a way, I think what has happened is good for India in the longer run, because US somewhere in your comfort zone, you've been pushed now to move out of the comfort zone. So even if there is a U-turn on tariffs going ahead, I think it's very clear that India needs to look at other geographies, especially exporters.
Right.
Now, if you're talking of consumption space, I think that's the best space to be in right now, because that's where we are seeing a huge sort of a move up. And I think that should be seen from the Q3, Q4 onwards.
Right.
And overall, actually I see the earnings improving. If you're talking of Q3, Q4 onwards, the earnings should start seeing an uptick.
Right.
And as and when that happens, all these FIIs who are staying out, I think we'll have to finally come back.
You agree with that, Mayuresh?
No, absolutely. In fact, as I mentioned offline, right,
Yes.
the valuation matrix that we are working with, and I completely subscribe to Amrish's point that earnings will make a strong comeback. They should sustain reasonably.
Correct.
We've just pegged in a very nominal earnings growth of 8.5%, 9% as a base case scenario on an FY27 exit, with assumptions of large banks, metal companies, actually not doing exponential growth, but a higher single-digit growth. Even if you peg that in, the base case scenario where the Nifty levels are right now, or 5% from the current levels, I think that should become a base case scenario.
Right.
Now, if earnings improve for all these factors put together, and Trump reversing for some reason or the other, the additional 25%.
That's being very optimistic.
A little realistic, because I think he will need to adjust at some point of time. Let's not forget what Amrish was saying, right? We are having an FTA with the Eurozone as well.
Right.
So if that goes through in the next
Right.
2 or 3 months, I think that compensates some element of loss that can come through the next financial year.
Yes.
Having said that, I think if that probably happens, and if you are able to grow at 10-11%, I think the upside for the market relatively opens up,
Right.
with a downside risk of 8 to 10%. So I think we are better off from a risk reward perspective.
Correct. But Madhvi, one factor that came through from what Amrish was saying is that people have to have money in their wallets to be able to
Correct.
spend. If you're not going to have the kind of wage hikes that an economy of our growth projections
Yeah.
needs to have, then what? Employment needs to keep pace
Yeah.
with the kind of growth projections that even the RBI is making. How do you balance that out? What are your thoughts on employment and wage hikes?
So as I said, the income effect is the most dominating factor when it comes to spending. You cannot push me to buy something just because you've reduced the prices of it. I need to be able to have the sustainable ways to sort of fund my big ticket purchases like a house or car and stuff like that. And a lot of thinking gets into it, right?
Or there is the risk of a credit bubble building.
Yeah,
and that's
but
not good
that's
ever.
not the case at this point. I wouldn't be putting too much of because RBI had tightened the norms a lot post 2023, and that actually played out against consumption to some extent, especially urban consumption. So, in fact, between 2021, 23, 24, we actually saw the incomes, sort of peaking for the sectors like IT and BFSI,
Right.
which is almost 50% of the listed space, right? And that actually had helped the urban income story, urban consumption story, and since then it has only been trending down. In fact, if you look at the last 2 years, net headcount addition from the IT sector has been negative consistently each quarter. It's not going to improve any sooner, as I understand, because not only is there a relatively slower growth that you're seeing in the world dynamic, especially in the US, but also there's now, the service sector which is getting sort of impacted by the trade noise, right?
Correct.
Which was not the case earlier. We've been even told that a lot of IT companies need to now renegotiate their their projects that they had actually priced in earlier. So a lot of things are happening in the IT segment.
So does that kind of suggest that the services sector growth and the contribution it makes to the GDP is something that we have to kind of be rational about, and now we need to build that much more into our consumption uptick?
No, I think services was still, because it's software service and not overall services is still a big chunk, right? Of course, this segment is important for the urban consumption story. There is a slower growth, but I'll be very honest that, if you look at the past cycles of IT segment, right, they've been very agile and very adaptable to whatever tensions come their way. I think they will sail through this one. There will be short-term disruption that will happen, but I think over the medium term, I don't think that the segment as a whole would be disrupted beyond a point.
So if you have to identify, and we are wrapping it up now, if we have to identify the demons that we need to slay this Dussehra for sustained long economic growth of the country, which ones would you identify them? I'll start with Mayuresh.
Everybody's expecting earnings to come back very, very strongly. I remain optimistic on the market. एक जो dialogue है, बाकी का market सब जगह, भारत एक जगह और.
Amresh, very quickly if I can.
See, one point which you raised just some time back.
Yes.
Employment.
Yes.
I think that has to be the focus
going to be a
area
key factor.
for the
We
government.
need to peg it.
Yes, because that's a catch-22. You're talking about employment, but where can there be employment without proper skill sets? So both these need to go together.
Right.
Otherwise, the demographic advantage which we've been talking about
Yes.
can actually turn out to be a disadvantage.
Do you think it's got accentuated with the H-1B visa fee hike? That's not going to be too relevant.
That's too small.
Right.
And here we're talking of crores of people.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, because a Ola driver or a Swiggy delivery boy is not employment.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
it has to be a proper employment.
Right.
Yeah.
And Madhvi, very quickly.
I'll just pick it up from both the gentlemen, and I would also agree that we need to get out of this broken window policy wherein we think that we are adding value to the economy by breaking things and remaking them when it comes to assets. That is not how we build. I agree with both of them that it's important to invest in R&D. That is the next big lever.
Right.
We need to invest on human capital. That's the next big lever. We can talk about employment. The quality employment is much more important, right? Look at the way China has evolved from being a manufacturing economy to now focusing on tech-driven, now even services for that matter.
Right.
We should have been doing what China is doing right now because we
Correct.
were much ahead of China in terms of tech. Right, they were more a manufacturing driven. So they've invested massively on R&D. We've really lagged behind that.
Right.
I think those should be the policy levers, and policymakers I think have realized that they need to pick up on those. But
There's a lot
so
of
many,
catch up to do, though.
Yeah, there's so much, again, the broken pieces around that they need to fix at the same
Correct.
time. So it'll be a difficult thing for them because we are a democracy, we're not what
Yes,
China is.
yes,
So there
yes.
are other nuances that we need to take care of. Policy making is a very difficult task. We
Yes.
can blame the policymakers. It's very difficult to actually execute
But still
a lot of things.
But it's still the positive takeaway as far as this festive spirit, and we'd like to keep it positive. We do see the potential of the stock markets, and perhaps that's the real story that we track on a day-to-day basis. What happens on the ground, of course, is going to be a tough one. It does have a lag effect. Of course, it takes a bit of time, but we are seeing that bit of catch up on the policy front as well. Madhvi, Mayuresh, Amrish, thank you very much for joining us on this special show.
Thank you so much.
Dussehra Dhamaka. I'm Vikram Oza from me and the team. Thank you so much for making the time and joining us here on NDTV Profit. Have a very happy Dussehra.